talk to Tim Kurkjian of ESPN about all of it. Great historian for the game, great voice for the game as well, joining us right now here on Willard and Dibs, 95.7 The Game. Tim, thanks for coming on. How you doing?
I've been better, fellas. It's been a rough week for all of us. You don't have to live in the Bay Area to be really sad about what happened this week.
No question about that. We share that with you. I wonder if you'd share with our audience some of your interactions with Willie Mays through the years.
Well, at Cooperstown several years ago, I want to say 20 years ago maybe, I interviewed Hank Aaron and Willie Mays at the same time. And I'm thinking to myself, this has got to be, that was the highlight of my career. I'm standing next to arguably the two greatest living players, two of the five greatest players of all time. And I got to interview both of them. That's about I had maybe 5 interactions with Willie. And as you guys know, with each one, I was more amazed by the size of his hands. It's the first thing I noticed, because I was told he's got the biggest, strongest hands you've ever seen. And that's what I noticed from that interview I did with Hank Aaron and Willie Mays, with this dinky little sports writer standing in between them. It was really, really cool, and Willie couldn't have been kinder to Hank and to me. So that was my first interaction with him, and I'll never forget it.
Only 1,415 home runs between the three of you, Tim, as I include you in there. Try to make sure that I have the total right, unless I missed one of yours. What was that moment like as far as the stories they were swapping, with Willie having started his career just a few years ahead of Hank?
Yeah, that was what really struck me, is their recall was amazingly good, especially Hank Aaron, who I did a game on TV, and he sat next to us for 4 innings and told an hour and a half of stories. I was stunned. And Willie was the same way. And what really struck me, fellas, about Willie Mays was this, just how gracious he was with his time to all sorts of people in the game. Like Ken Griffey Jr. told me that when he was 17 years old, Willie sought him out to meet him. Reggie Jackson told me that when Reggie was a rookie, Willie Mays came by to meet Reggie Jackson. "Where's Reggie Jackson?" he would say. Johnny Bench told me in the 68 All-Star game, Johnny's first All-Star game, and of course he's scared to death, Willie Mays comes up to him and whispers in his ear, "You should be starting the All-Star game." And Johnny told me that's what validated his season, that it proved not only do I belong here, but I should be starting, because the greatest player I've ever seen told me that. And Juan Marichal told me that when he was a young player and he came up, the first thing that Willie did was take him out to dinner before he ever played a game for the Giants, and then went and bought him a bunch of clothes at a clothing store. This is maybe the underrated part about Willie Mays, was how gracious he was with his time, of course, to his teammates, but even those elsewhere, because he just wanted to sell the game properly and get everyone included, and he was great at that.
Tim Kurkjian, ESPN, the stories are amazing, and of course it's too easy if I just said, hey, will there ever be another Willie Mays? Everybody would say no. But here's something we've been discussing, and I wonder if you'd weigh in, Tim, which is that the age of analytics kind of devalues individual stats instead to push up the team. We're also just a much more cynical society. Do you think that players of today, someday it will feel like it does right now with Willie Mays? Or do you think the majesty, the aura that surrounds ball players will not be the same?
Well, I don't think it's ever going to be the same as it was back when, say, I grew up in the 60s. I just know that when Ted Williams went to the pitcher's mound during the 99 World Series, those players in 99 were completely in awe of Ted Williams. They were afraid to go up and speak to him. And then Cal Ripken and Tony Gwynn, who had a relationship with Ted, drew everyone in there. And that was the same that people felt, certainly about Hank Aaron, and more than any, about Willie Mays. And I just hope that our players today recognize who came before then. And I'm just not sure we have that exact same reverence. We acknowledge that the players today are bigger, stronger, faster, and maybe better than ever. But I'm not sure there's anyone we're going to look back on in today's game and with the same reverence as Willie Mays, because, frankly, Willie was better than everyone. It's that simple.
And does that make how much better he was than everyone even more impressive? The fact that he was only 5'10 and 170. I mean, this is not Ellie De La Cruz or Aaron Judge or some of these other incredible athletes. Willie was a great athlete, but smaller of stature. Does that make it even more impressive what he was able to do?
Yeah, I think so. But having spoken and met Willie many times, sorry, I would never call him small of stature in any way. And it was because of those massive hands. Pete Rose told me, he said, I weighed the same as Willie Mays. I was as tall as Willie Mays, and I hit 160 homers, and he hit 660 homers. That's where the strength came from, in his hands, wrists, and forearms. As you know, Dwayne Kuiper once told me, he said, my dad, Dwayne Kuiper's dad, used to tell him, you always have to win a handshake with whoever you're shaking hands with. Dwayne Kuiper, as we know, has incredibly strong hands for a guy who wasn't an incredibly strong player, but he had great, strong hands. And he said, you couldn't win a handshake with Willie Mays. Nobody could. So when I look at that body, 5'10", 180, I want to say in his prime, that's the perfect baseball player's body. This game is not built for Aaron Judge's size, which makes what he's doing even more remarkable. Willie Mays had the perfect build to be a great baseball player because of his speed, because of his power, short arms, not a giant strike zone. If I would build a baseball player, I would have him look exactly like Willie Mays.
Tim, when was the last time you interacted with Willie?
I probably saw him maybe 7 years ago, and he was starting to fail a little bit then as far as mobility. I saw him at the ballpark a couple times in San Francisco. I had a nice chat with him, and but that was probably the last time, maybe 7 years ago. I spoke to him on the phone multiple times after seeing him for the last time for stories that I was doing, but that was probably the last time. And that was another thing that made him so special, is he would just go to the ballpark in order to talk to the players. And Griffey Jr. told me a story once that he was walking past the manager's office in San Francisco somehow, and Willie Mays screamed at him, Griffey, get in here. You have enough home runs to be in this room. And Griffey thought that was like the greatest thing ever. And that's how Willie dealt with so many people, with so much respect for younger, older, other team, his team, everything.
Here's why I ask, and this is not an easy question to ask, but now that Willie has passed and we're all starting to hear from those who knew him the best, it's starting to strike me that Willie was struggling the last few years, maybe in ways that we fans didn't really realize. And one thing that I loved about this game tonight and the Negro League stats and everything that's happened recently is I was sort of thankful that I'm like, even though Willie didn't make it to today, he knew all of this was going on. And now I'm sort of wondering if he was aware that all this was going on, because I really hope that for him. Do you have any knowledge of that?
I don't know exactly what he knew and when he knew it. And that's a shame, because this is a celebration tonight of Negro League baseball and those amazing players that came from that region. Satchel Paige, Billy Williams, Ozzie Smith, Hank Aaron, and of course Willie Mays, and many, many others. But with his death, I think it's going to be an even greater tribute to Willie Mays. And I'm sure they're going to do it right at Rickwood, because it's such a historic place and he's such a historic player. Fellas, I still am not sure despite everything we've said, that people truly understand how great Willie Mays was. When he broke in 1950 at age 51, at age 20, the Major Leagues had never seen anybody like him. He was the greatest combination of power, speed, and defense the game had ever seen. And I believe 73 years later, he is still the greatest combination of power, speed, and defense that has ever played the game. You guys know, if he hadn't missed 2 years of military service, he would have hit over 700 homers.
Yep.
If he hadn't played at Candlestick Park for all those home games, he would have hit over 700 homers. He's the greatest base runner I've ever seen. He's the greatest defensive outfielder of all time, center fielder. And, he won a Gold Glove in center field at age 37. I'm not sure everyone, even today, appreciates how great he was then and how great he was the day he died.
And even after winning that Gold Glove at 37, he went on to play 5 more seasons, including as a 42-year-old, where he still appointed himself pretty well with the New York Mets. Tim Kurkjian here on 95.7 The Game. Is Major League Baseball starting to do a good enough job to alert the younger fans to what's gone on before, such as this Rickwood game and Willie Mays?
Yeah, I think it's really important. Look, I'm hopelessly biased on this because I'm 67 years old and I've spent my entire life looking forward, but also looking back at the people who came before. I mean, this is the only game where it really, really matters. People who played 100 years ago, and those guys are still relevant as opposed to, say, football and basketball, which I just don't think you can make those comparisons. So I think it's really important for Major League Baseball to alert everyone and inform everyone this is how it used to be. Because the greatest players from 100 years ago, the greatest, biggest, strongest, best players, I believe could play today. And I think if we dropped Willie Mays in his prime into today's baseball, he would be the best player on the field, period. I believe that. I'm not sure everyone else agrees with me, but I think given this is a skill sport and he was as skillful and as athletic as anyone who ever played the game, I don't think he would have any trouble adjusting to today's game.
Tim, we get so few clips. Those of us who didn't get to see him play, everybody knows the center field catch, the one where it goes straight over his shoulders and he grabs it. But there's just not that many highlights compared to what we get today. So I'd love to draw on your experience outside of the ones that maybe we know. Is there a memory of watching him play baseball that stands out to you?
Yeah, well, first off, the catch, I asked Bob Feller, who was on the Indians at the time, I said, was that the greatest catch you've ever seen? And, Bob Feller looked at me, he goes, that wasn't that great of a catch. We knew he was going to catch that ball. No one in our dugout was surprised that he caught it. And it was a compliment because he was saying, Willie Mays was out there. We knew he was going to catch that. And Willie told me once that, and he's a very humble guy, as you know, but he said that wasn't even in my top 10 best catches that I ever made. And it is the greatest single defensive play in the history of postseason baseball. But you asked me a personal memory. When I was 8 years old, I was hopelessly in love with baseball at age 8. Trust me. But the 65 All-Star game comes on, and I'm 8 years old. And Willie Mays, we just got a color TV. So now I'm watching a baseball game in color for the first time in my life. And this perfect baseball player steps to the plate and hits a home run to start the All-Star game. And I was captivated by Willie Mays before then. I was mesmerized by him after then because an 8-year-old kid is sitting in his living room watching a color TV, and his baseball hero from 3,000 miles away hits a home run to start the All-Star game. And I said, all right, that's it. He's the greatest player I've ever seen, and here it is. 60 years later, he's still the greatest player I've ever seen.
Is that, I guess, that time and that fact that you just had a color TV, and I'm sure it was the only TV in the house as it was when I was a kid, a little bit younger than you, but is that partly why the impact of Willie Mays was so much greater than even any player in modern baseball, because there's so much other content that's going to distract us now?
Right, absolutely. And when you only get to see a guy play 2 or 3 times a year on television. It is appointment viewing. So when you get to see Ronald Acuna Jr., who's ridiculously good, but you get to see him every single night, that's a great thing. Don't get me wrong. But when you see Willie Mays and you only get to see him, in the 71 playoff game or the All-Star game or, the Saturday game of the week once in a while, you're not missing that. And I think in this case, less was better because you really got to appreciate, oh my goodness, I have to watch this game because Willie Mays is playing, as opposed to today where you could say, well, Willie Mays is playing, but he's playing tomorrow night on TV also or in person, so I'll just wait for that. You couldn't wait in the 60s to watch Willie Mays play.
Tim, you just called him the perfect baseball player.
That's what Johnny Bench called him.
Yeah, I'd love to hear
Johnny
more
Bench,
about that.
Well, Johnny Bench, I said, tell me about Willie Mays. He said he's the greatest player ever. He was magical. He was perfect. Fellas, he led the league in stolen bases 3 years in a row. He hit 660 homers. He's the only player ever to hit 300 at career average, 300 homers, and 10 Gold Gloves. And, of course, he went 302, 660, and 12 Gold Gloves, which would have been 16 if they had given him out when he really started his career. He was, as I said, a great base runner. He had a tremendous throwing arm. He was the best defensive center fielder I've ever seen. So when we talk about 5-tool players, which we overdo that, he is the ultimate 5-tool player. He was better than everyone at everything. That's how good Willie Mays was.
We've been playing with the fact that he's the only 3,000 hit, 300 homer, 300-plus batting average, and 300 steals guys, and Mark and I have been going back and forth and trying to find players who've gotten close, and not many have gotten that close, but you mentioned Hank Aaron before. Hank actually one who approached it. He ended up with 240 steals. Would you say that Hank Aaron is maybe the second best player just behind Willie that you ever saw?
Yes, no doubt. He's the second best player that I ever saw. And please, I'm not taking anything away from Hank Aaron because, by the way, he was a great defensive right fielder. He had a really good throwing arm. He was an excellent base runner. But Willie was better than him at all of those things, and Hank will be the first one to tell you. Plus, this cannot be understated. Hank told me once, I was boring. I just was there every day, and I just accrued a bunch of hits and homers. Willie had a flair and a style to him that nobody else had, and that has to be factored in also. Reggie Jackson told me Willie is Jim Brown. He is Michael Jordan. He is Steph Curry shooting jumpers before the game. He is Baryshnikov. He is Simone Biles. That was the comparison that Reggie Jackson made, that Willie Mays was all of them put together. And that is quite a compliment coming from another Hall of Famer, Reggie Jackson.
How rare was that in those days to be a showman? Well,
again, nobody did it like he did. And we have a lot of showmen today, but Willie's basket catch, it's always amazed me that no one has ever duplicated that. No one's ever really tried to do it like he did because only he could do that. And when I say he was a showman, he just played with a flair and a style. Believe me, he was not running around the bases, raising the roof, or going, 1 mile an hour in order to show up the other team. When I say style, I mean scoring from first on a double. I mean that hat and that helmet flying off. I mean him going to the alleys and making catches. I asked Felipe Alou, how good was Willie Mays? And he said he was too good. It was like he was so much better than everyone else that he was too good. I'll never forget that.
Tim, thank you so much. What awesome perspective, great stories. Really, really fun to have you on. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, fellas. See you.
Okay.
Thanks, Tim.
Tim Kurkjian, ESPN, the perfect baseball player.
Yeah, from Johnny Bench. And